Have any advice about breaking people up in a romance novel? My name is Gina. I'm an author, editor, publishing professional. I help you make your writing better. This question comes from my Patreon supporters. If you would like to have a question answered in a future video, make sure that you go over there and join at the interactive tier, and you can suggest topics for future videos. But if you are planning to break people up in a romance novel, which is a key component of the romance genre, you are going to have to think about the reasons why those people would break up and what makes a satisfying story within that conflict. Stories are driven by conflict. If we have two people who are just making really healthy decisions and are making the right decisions, and those decisions are always in harmony with one another, there is no conflict, there is no tension, there is no story, in short. So in order for your character's breakup to feel natural, it needs to be an extension of the conflict that they are having between the two characters. And that conflict needs to be built on something that makes sense to your audience. It does not necessarily need to be like a healthy or reasonable conflict. It needs to be a conflict that makes sense to the audience. In order for your character's breakup in a romance novel to make sense to your audience, it needs to be driven by the conflict that is in the novel. Now, how do you go about creating a conflict? There are a couple of tropes that are popular and easy, but readers actually kind of hate them. When I say they are popular, I mean that they get done a lot because they are easy. You will probably hear these referred to as like a miscommunication trope, but a miscommunication trope can be done well or it can be done very badly. There are times in which you are wanting to shake those characters and be like, just talk to each other, when a two-sentence conversation would solve all of their problems. Usually readers tend to hate that kind of conflict because it feels contrived. It's not realistic. It shouldn't be driving them apart. It just doesn't make sense to your reader. Even though you could very easily justify, like, no, people are afraid to have these conversations. That doesn't mean that it makes sense within the context of a story and within the context of a novel. Novels, even realistic ones, are fantasy based to a certain degree. They are fictionalized. They are following certain story beats. They are fulfilling reader expectations. Life is rarely so neat and so organized. Even when the decisions are messy on the page, we are still following a specific structure. So when you are looking at breaking your characters up, I want you to go back to the beginning and look at the flaws that your characters have within the story. And yes, your characters should have flaws. They can still be very likable people, but they should have flaws. In addition to flaws, they should have something that they want that is not tied to the romance at hand. Yes, in a romance novel, the goal is always going to be they live happily ever after. That is the point of the genre. That is the structure that we are building towards. But your characters should be well-rounded characters. They should be fully realized, fully fleshed out people. And so that is going to require them to have something else that they want out of life. That something else should seem to be in conflict with the romance at hand in some sort of a way. The thing that they want can be something internal, like that they want to protect their precious feeling and their broken heart from ever being hurt again, that they want to protect their pride from ever needing to rely on somebody else, or it can be something external. They are chasing a dream job and that's going to require them to move around constantly. And the person they are in love with is a certified teacher only in this state, serving this community that means a lot to them personally. Those two wants become in conflict with one another, and someone's going to have to make a choice. Someone's going to have to decide. How do you go about figuring out which character is going to have to make a choice and who's going to have to decide? You're going to tie that to those flaws that I listed earlier, or that I mentioned earlier, that if your character has a flaw, they have a thing that they are trying to overcome, they are going to have to overcome that in order for the relationship to work. Romances are not usually about two broken, unhappy people deciding to just live together in their brokenness and unhappiness and never resolve their issues and continue to be toxic at one another. That is not the happily in happily ever after or happily for now. You're going to have to get these characters to resolve their conflicts and overcome their fatal flaws. And this is where the grand gesture comes in. The grand gesture is going to be performed by the character who has the greater flaw to overcome, and they are going to overcome their flaw as part of that grand gesture. So you are going to have the character behave in a way that they have been building towards, in a way that feels inevitable and yet surprising and delightful. So if you have a character whose fatal flaw is that she wants to protect her vulnerable heart from ever being broken again, and therefore she doesn't trust anybody, she is going to have to act in a way that demonstrates that she trusts the love interest in the story. She is going to have to overcome that internal block in order to do the thing that she wants externally within the world. You can have all kinds of conflicts keeping people apart. These can be social differences, these can be class differences, these can be personality differences, these can be different goals and wants and dreams. These can be something that they are overcoming from their past that is interpersonal, that is buried deep within, that they don't even know of, that they aren't even totally aware of in themselves. And over the course of the story, they should be making steps towards repairing that flaw and overcoming that conflict, but it is not going to happen completely until they decide that this one person is worth taking that last step, worth making that final change, worth letting go of the thing that had helped them feel protected until now. Because that is the core of a romance novel. That is what people love about these stories, is that there is that one person out there who can make you overcome your own flaws. Now, that person is not the person who changes you, and you are not changing for them. You are changing for yourself, but they are the person who inspired that change in you, the person who makes you want to be better than you would be on your own. A romance isn't really a romance if it's just people coming together in a business arrangement or because it's fun for now. That's a different thing. That's a valid story, and there's a lot of them out there like that. And if that's what you are writing, I encourage you to keep doing that. But a romance is about two people coming together, falling in love with one another, and making each other realize that they can be better together and be better than they have been up until now. Your conflict should always be tied to those internal flaws and those external forces keeping your characters apart. When they decide to overcome those, that's when the characters come back together. Now, V, the asker of this question on Patreon, specifically asked about third act breakups. Most readers will dislike a third act breakup if it feels contrived. So if you have had your characters working on their flaws and overcoming these obstacles in their relationship all the way up until the 75% mark, and then they just break up because of some stupid little fight that they really should be past having a breakup over, that's when people are going to feel like they have been lied to. That's when they are going to feel like the story is not fulfilling its promises. My recommendation is usually to have the characters break up right at the very end of Act 2 and have the tension and the conflict in Act 3 be based around the characters not together. They know now that they want to be together, that they would have been willing to make it work, but it's too late. They've already moved to another state. They've already accepted some other offer of a relationship. Something now is keeping them apart. It feels like it is too little too late. They know what they want. They know what would make them happy, but they are being kept apart by some other circumstances. And then that third act conflict from about the 75-ish% mark until around the 90% mark in romance, somewhere in there, that conflict is going to be driven by the, oh, I know what I need to do and I know what I want to do. Am I going to be brave enough to go do the thing, even though it's going to look a little bit crazy to everybody around me? This stage of the novel should be driven by a reader being like, ah, just do it already. You already know what you want. Rather than like, oh, why did you do that? You're so stupid. It's a nuanced difference. It's not a significant difference in a lot of ways, but it is a difference. These third act breakups that a lot of readers complain about are usually driven by that miscommunication trope. It is when everybody has been working to overcome their flaws and overcome the conflicts between them, and then they have done so and they look like they're going to be happily ever after, and then they have a fight over something stupid. Oh, your ex-girlfriend thinks that you're handsome still, then we're breaking up. We're not going to be able to make this work. If you have the couple already together and be able to make it work, the thing that then keeps them apart needs to be significant, and it needs to make sense. It needs to be tied to the character flaws that you have already demonstrated on the page. It cannot be an introduction of some new flaw, of some new conflict. If you have listened to this entire video and realized like, oh my gosh, I don't know what these internal flaws are for my character, I've just been keeping them apart based on miscommunication and based on not understanding what's happening, then you probably have a fundamental flaw within the story. You need to go back to the first act of the story and figure out what it is your character wants and what would naturally keep them apart from one another. As always, these videos are brought to you by the people who support me over on Patreon. Thank you so much to everybody who pitches in and who makes this information available to everyone. YouTube thinks you would like one of these videos that is now on the screen. And as always, if you are subscribing, that really helps the channel, helps me continue to make content available for everybody who's wanting to break into publishing. Thanks. Bye.